How much would you love to say at one point in your life what we hear John the Baptist saying here in the Gospel? My joy is now complete. It's obviously something that we seek after, and we're kind of chasing this happiness and this joy all of our life. Many people have a different image of what it means to be happy than what Christians have. The world has definitely a different idea of what it means to be happy. And to the world, John the Baptist would not have been considered capable of happiness. Definitely he would not have been considered to have his happiness and his joy be complete. Because the world will say that you have to have a lot of money. But John the Baptist did not even have $1 to his name. The world will say you have to have a lot of pleasure. But John never had any worldly pleasure. He never had any intimacy with a woman. And so all of these things that John did not have. And so according to the world, he would not be considered capable of happiness. But he himself considered himself not only happy, but completely happy. And obviously, this took him some time. It didn't just happen overnight. It took him time and a lot of hardship, a lot of suffering and a lot of purification for him to get to that point, to the point where Jesus calls him the greatest man born among women. But then he says, of those in the kingdom, he's the least. And so this gospel will reveal to us a little bit about how John reached this point. We know a lot of other stuff about John the Baptist, about how he reached that point, how he completely submitted himself to God and he gave himself completely to God, which obviously is the way toward true happiness. But here in this gospel, we see that there was something that was almost like it would have been a big hindrance to his own happiness. And not only to his happiness, but to him completing the mission. And it's the same thing for us. And so I want us to look at what happens here with John. And through his response, we can learn how we will have that complete joy, and also how we will make ourselves perfectly fit, or as much as possible, to do the will of God. This was at the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, right after his first public miracle. And obviously we read in the gospel that Jesus and his disciples, they were baptizing people, and there were a lot of people going to him. Now John had disciples as well. Some of the first apostles of Jesus were disciples of John the Baptist. And so the disciples of John the Baptist, some of them are very confused at this point. Here we read that they had an argument at first, and then they go to John the Baptist and they said, there's this guy, and he's baptizing, obviously it was Jesus, and all are going to him. It's as if to say, why aren't they coming to you anymore? And maybe it would have been a human inclination for John to say, yeah, you're right. Why aren't they coming to me anymore? I was the leader. They were coming to me. I was baptizing them. I was the one that was teaching. I was the one that had all of these disciples. And now they're not coming to me anymore. It would have been very easy for John to fall into this trap of jealousy and envy and of pride, to make it all about himself. And unfortunately, brothers and sisters, we fall into that trap a lot of the time. And we do it, of course, because we have sinful human desires. But when we do that, we will not reach the level of complete joy that John reached and that God has planned for all of us. And also we will not be able to serve the Lord faithfully if we make our life all about us. That's not who John was. John realized what his role was. He said, the bridegroom is the one who has the bride. The best man stands and he hears the bridegroom's voice and he rejoices at the bridegroom's voice. Think about it. What if there were a wedding feast and the best man tried to make the party all about him? That's a very bad best man. He's not a real close friend of the bridegroom. The wedding is all about the bridegroom and his bride. And the best man would never take the attention for himself. And John would not take the attention for himself. John would not take the people for himself. He knew what his role was. His role was to prepare the way for Jesus. And he says, therefore this joy of mine is now full. He must increase, but I must decrease. And so, brothers and sisters, there's a lot that we can learn from John the Baptist about how to have this complete joy in our lives. For sure, there's something that will be blocking, that will be a hindrance to this joy. And of course, if we're going to say yes to the Lord, and yes to His mission that He has for us, and yes to the joy that He wants us to have, we're going to have to say no to many things, including the idea that it's all about us. And something that leads to that is by looking at other people, looking at what other people have, looking at what other people, not only what they have as far as possessions go, but with what they're doing with their lives. Listening to what's going on with other people. Doing this will lead us to think about it more, and it will lead us to be envious of people probably, and ultimately it will lead us to not be happy. He must increase, but I must decrease. All of those evil inclinations that we have, and the things that cause them, that are part of our human nature, our sinful, fallen human nature, all of those things need to decrease, and the Lord needs to increase in our lives specifically. And it has to actually happen. We have to actually make the effort. This did not happen for John overnight. He had to work very hard to have this happen. And the same thing applies for us, brothers and sisters. We have to actually think about in our lives, what are we doing? Who are we looking at? Who are we thinking about so much that we are losing our peace and our happiness that the Lord wants us to have? And we have to actually think very specifically about what we're doing in our lives. Do you really think that it's going to make you happy scrolling for 5 hours a day, looking at what people are doing with their lives? It's good to be on social media, obviously, if you want to be connected with other people, especially all around the world. And social media has a lot of good things to it. But we get sometimes so obsessed with it and so obsessed with people. And we fill our minds and our hearts with these images of other people. A lot of the time it's fake images. It's just the highlights of people's lives, and it's not even real. People obviously don't share the suffering and the hardships that they go through most of the time. And yet we consume all of that. And so think about it. How much do you consume that? How much do you, aside from social media, how much do you think about and listen and talk about other people and what they're doing with their lives? Sure, it's good to know what other people are doing. We have to have good relationships with others. But most of what we talk about, I think I could say most of what we talk about is very superficial, and a lot of the time it is evil. It's gossip. And it's not good to talk about people like that. And it's not only a sin that we do, but it's going to make us unhappy if we're constantly obsessed with other people and with what they're doing with their lives. He must increase, I must decrease. Decrease that and increase your intake of Jesus and His words. Literally, what does John say? I stand and listen for the bridegroom's voice. We have to listen to Jesus, to listen to Him, to look at Him more, to read the Scriptures more, so that the Scriptures and the words of the Lord and His teachings will influence our life more than anything. And they will give us peace and true joy. This is how our joy will be made complete. It starts now. It starts with us examining our lives and thinking about where we are falling. And it could happen to any of us. The devil tried to get John the Baptist at the very beginning of the ministry of Jesus. And the devil wants to get us. And the devil is not going to come in this big scary way. No, he's just going to say, oh, look at what this person is wearing. Who got divorced lately? Why should I be so concerned about it? What did these people do with their lives? Why does this person have this and I don't? And these thoughts are going to lead us to lose our peace and to not be able to achieve the great joy that the Lord has for us. Unless we turn to Jesus and we constantly turn to Him and we look at Him and we listen to Him and we think about all of the graces that He wants to give us in our lives, and also how He wants to use us for His mission, so that we make ourselves completely available to Him in trustful surrender, so that He will use us for good, and He will also give us the joy, the great joy that only He can offer us in our lives. Amen.